Hey everybody, welcome back to my coverage of the PogChamps 3 tournament. This is the second championship quarterfinals match, Daniel Negreanu versus BenjyFishy. This is game 3, the tiebreaker. These guys are tied at 1-1. If you missed the second game, check it out in the info card up there. Come back and watch this video. But yes, Daniel won the first game with the black pieces in a very long and hard-fought game. Benji won the second game fairly quickly after Daniel missed a tactic in the second game, and now we're in the third tiebreaker game. So the tiebreaker is a little bit different than the group stage. So in the group stage, if the players were tied after 2 games, we would go to a third Armageddon game, and that basically was black had drawing odds, but white had a little bit of extra time. Now that we're in the elimination format, the tiebreaker is a little different. The players will simply continue playing games until there is a winner. So if they draw, they simply swap colors and play again. So we could have 5, 6, 10 game matches here if the players just keep on drawing. That's extremely unlikely in my opinion, but it is possible theoretically. So yes, BenjyFishy did get to choose what color he wanted to play. Since he was in the higher seed for this matchup, he got that higher seed because he won his group A in, I think he was in Group A. He won his group in the group stage. Daniel, he only placed second in his group in the group stage. So for that reason, Benji got to choose his color in the tiebreaker match, and he chose white. And without further ado, let's get right into this. The time control is 5-0. The normal time control is 10 plus 5, so 10 minutes, and each player gains 5 seconds after every move. But this is 5-0, so both players will get 5 minutes, and that's it. They better use their time wisely. And without further ado, let's get right into the game. Benji has the white pieces. He plays knight to f3. We see knight to f6 from Negreanu, and we follow the same game that occurred in the first game of this match. g3, c5, bishop g2, d6, castles, and now knight c6. This is just following the first game. Still very good moves from both players so far. We have d4 now, and c takes d4. This was played in the first game, and knight takes d4. And here in the first game, Daniel played queen to d7, which was not the best move because it blocks this bishop. And better, I had said, was queen to c7 or queen to b6. You do need to defend this knight because it is attacked twice. So here, Daniel plays queen to c7, which I think is a huge improvement on his previous move. And here, after queen d7 in the first game, Benji took this knight on c6, which I also didn't like very much. And here, Benji did not take this knight. So once again, an improvement from Benji by not taking this knight. So both players improved their opening. Instead, here, Benji played c4. And here, Daniel played e5. And I don't actually like this move very much. Here, I think e6 would have been much better. And the reason why I don't like e5 is because you're just making this d-pawn extremely weak for the rest of the game. It's going to be backwards. You can't support it with a pawn from behind. And this is just really tricky for a beginner to see. You know, you're told to control the center and develop your pieces. So, you know, why would you play e6? It blocks your bishop, and e5 controls the center more than e6 does. But it's just, these pawn weaknesses are really, they can come back to bite you later in the game. And so we'll see if that happens with Daniel. But yeah, I think e6 may have been much stronger here. And once again, these pawn weaknesses are usually hard for beginners to identify. But we have e5 from Daniel, and here we see knight b5 from Benji, already attacking this weak d6 pawn, and also the queen here. So here Daniel moves the queen to d7. I think queen to d8 would have been better, once again, because you don't block this bishop. That's why you don't really want to be putting your queen on d7 here. But we have queen to d7, and now knight 1 to c3 from Benji. Very good move. We have a6, and now knight to a3 from Benji. Queen a4 was an interesting move. It's this idea where you can't take the knight because your pawn is pinned to your rook. And white could have some ideas of bringing the knight to d5 and you know, forking on this c7 square. So this was an interesting move that Benji could have gone for, but he played knight to a3, which is a perfectly fine move as well. We have bishop e7, Daniel continues developing, and now b3, castles, and bishop b2, both players continuing to develop. Daniel gets castled, very good so far. And here Daniel plays knight g4, and he spent a bit of time on this move, nearly nearly a minute actually, which is a very long time for a 5-minute game. And here, I think he just knew he had to play something, and he played knight g4, which isn't the best move, but I think here as Daniel, a good plan could be bringing your rook to b8, which this move is definitely hard for a beginner to play because it doesn't look like you're doing much, but really you are supporting this b pawn, and also you're getting your rook off of this diagonal with this bishop. It could be susceptible to pins or tactics later on. You could have your knight pinned to your rook. It's just good to get your rook off of this diagonal. And you also could be supporting a b5 push later in the game. Obviously, it wouldn't be good to do immediately, but rook b8, definitely a playable move. If you don't see that, you could just bring your rook to the center, help control the center. Or if you don't think either of those are good moves, you might think your rook is just blocked behind your bishop or even your pawn, you could just play a move like h6. It's always a useful move, protect against back rank weaknesses, and yeah. But we have knight g4 here, and it's just kind of a waste of a move because this knight is not really doing anything. It was fine on f3, probably even more useful on f3, and all of these squares you're not going to be able to do anything here as black. But he did eventually play something, which is definitely good. You can't just let your time run out to 0. So time management is also important. But let's see if Benji can now take advantage of this, kind of useless move. We have knight to d5 from Benji, and now Daniel brings his knight back to f6. So it kind of just shows that he doesn't really know what to do right now. He's kind of cramped a little bit. This bishop still needs to develop. If his queen was not on d7, it would probably have an easier time of developing. But here you have to play a move like bishop to d8. And the reason is because white was threatening this fork on the rook and the queen with this knight to d5 move. So yeah, this knight to f6 now allows this knight b6 fork. And so will Benji go for it? I suspect that was his reason behind playing knight d5. However, Benji does not go for it. He instead plays knight takes e7 check. So maybe he was focused on picking up the bishop pair, which is usually a positional asset. But yeah, he just had this fork, and that would have been very strong for white. That would have nearly been GG, yo. But we have knight takes e7 check instead. And Daniel happily takes us back. Queen takes e7, and we have knight c2 from Benji, getting his knight back into the game. We have bishop d7. Daniel finally develops, and now knight to e3. b5 now from Daniel, and I think rook f to d8, just trying to support this weak d pawn that you've created, would be a better move. Also, when you play b5, it's important to know that you're stepping into this pin. So maybe you want to play your a rook to d8 instead. I think either rook could come to the d file and be fine here. I think bishop e6 is also a fine move. Potentially wanting to support this d5 push to get rid of this weak d pawn. But b5 is an okay move overall. It's not immediately losing or anything. But there were other better alternatives. We have knight d5 now, and now knight takes d5, queen takes d5, and now rook a to c8, now defending this knight for a second time. Rook f to d1, now just pressuring this weak d pawn that Daniel created very early on. Here I think c takes b5. It looks like white can win a pawn here with c takes b5, but white actually cannot win this pawn. It's a little tricky, but after a takes b5, if white plays queen takes b5 here, now black has this tactic which totally brings him back into the game, which is knight d4. The knight is defended, also hits the queen and the e pawn, and if the queen stays connected to this e pawn with a move like queen to e3, now there's bishop b5, and this is a skewer, so wherever the queen moves, say to e3, now there's knight takes e2 check, and black will have these nice open files and semi-open files for his rooks. His position is sort of opening up, and this d pawn weakness is no longer a thing. So black would definitely be back in the game if white tried to go for this free pawn on b5. But I don't know if Benji just didn't see this or if he saw that it was no good, because he does not go for it. He instead simply plays rook f to d1, simply pressuring this d pawn more, which is a great move. We have knight b4 now, and now queen takes d6. This simply hangs the d pawn, though just looking quickly, I don't know if black had any good way of defending it. But yeah, just don't try to avoid creating weaknesses in your position, and this won't happen to you. So this forces a queen trade now because there's too many things hanging. So queen takes d6, rook takes d6, and now bishop f5. And now we have bishop takes e5. A little bit more precise would have been c takes b5 first, and the reason is, now you can be up 2 pawns, 1, 2. If you instead simply play bishop takes e5, now there's b takes c4, and you've ruined your pawn structure, and it's just not as good because you've ruined your pawn structure. You now have this isolated pawn. So yes, c takes b5 would have been slightly more accurate, but we have bishop takes e5 instead, and now Daniel plays f6. And I think Daniel has made this mistake in every single game he's played, if I'm not mistaken, where he pushes his pawns in front of his king. And this is just not something you want to be doing. I know I suggested this h6 move earlier, but h6 can often be much more useful than it is weakening. f6 is, I think, nearly always, very, very often more weakening than it is useful. And the reason is because of this diagonal here, right? And so we will see later in this game, this diagonal proves to be susceptible to tactics on the black king. So it is attacking this bishop here, but this one move initiative is not worth the weaknesses that this move creates. You wouldn't even want to be playing a move like g6 here because your opponent still has a dark squared bishop. You do not have a dark squared bishop anymore. h6 would be the safest king pawn move, and really you wouldn't want to make any other moves with any of these pawns in front of your king right now. You just got to keep your king safe. There's too many pieces on the board right now. But we have f6, and bishop goes back to c3, now hitting this knight on b4. We have knight to c2 hitting the rook, and rook to c1. I think Daniel here thought his knight was hanging because he spent a bit of time looking for somewhere to move, and he eventually moved it to a3. Though you could have just left the knight here. Once again, this b takes c4 move from Daniel would have been good. You don't actually win a pawn here, though, as Daniel, because if you go for rook takes c4, now there's bishop d5. And look at that diagonal weakness that was caused by this f6 move. So it just goes to show. But we have knight a3 by Daniel, and now bishop b4 from Benji. And here I think Negreanu thought his knight was trapped. Remember, he thought it was hanging on c2. And so he didn't see any way to defend it. Really, here you just have to go back to c2, and your knight is defended by your bishop. But instead, we see Daniel take this pawn on c4, knight takes c4, and after bishop takes, or b takes c4 and b takes c4, we have rook to d5 by Benji, hitting this bishop. And here, Benji could have even played rook takes c4, actually, because once again, we have this bishop d5 fork. But rook d5 is a perfectly fine move, too. Actually, this move may even be much better than rook takes c4 because it forces trades, which you definitely want to be going for those trades when you're up in material. So you're hitting this bishop, and you're also you also have a discovered attack on this rook. So really, either you're going to lose material here as black, or you're going to have to trade a lot of pieces. And Daniel goes for trading pieces, which is definitely the better decision. You don't want to be losing more material. Trades are not good when you're down in material, but losing even more material is even worse. So bishop e6 and bishop takes f8, bishop takes d5, bishop takes d5 check, king takes f8, and rook takes c4. Both the best moves from both players here in these sequence of trades. Obviously, Daniel would not want to trade rooks here because he would just be down a piece and a pawn in a completely losing endgame. But both players are getting quite low on time. Daniel with only 42 seconds, Benji with 1:13 left. So there could be possible flagging tactics, dirty flags in this game. So we'll just have to see. We have rook d8 attacking the bishop and e4 defending, also pushing pawns in the endgame. We have g6 and now a4, f5 and now f3, f takes e4, f takes e4. White now has a passed pawn. We have rook to e8 and king to f2, king to e7, and Daniel has 22 seconds left. He also has pre-moves disabled and he's not the quickest with the mouse. So I noticed it took him around 1 second at the minimum to make a move, even if he was moving as quickly as possible. But you know, who knows? Benji is not the fastest mover either, and I didn't see any pre-moves from him, so who knows? You know, Benji's obviously winning on the clock and the board right now, but anything can still happen. We have rook to c6 and king to d7. Rook takes a6, picking up that a pawn, and rook to e5. Rook b6, and now rook g5. A5, and white is going to promote this pawn. You really have to keep this rook on the back rank, or behind this pawn at the very least, just to try to put up some resistance. We have king to c7, and now rook b7 check. The rook is defended by the bishop. We have king to c8, and now a6, and that pawn is going to promote. Here you have to play, or the most resistance is rook to h5, and now if you play something like a7 here, we could have rook takes h2, and then oops, oh my goodness. Sorry about that. You would not want to, I mean, you could actually play rook to a2 here, and the idea is now if white takes on a2, you take this hanging rook, and I mean, white is still winning here because they have this passed pawn and the extra piece, but, you know, white is also very low on time. So this would definitely be the biggest resistance from black. But instead we have rook e5, and now this is simply a mate in 3 for white. After a7, you can only delay, you have no way of stopping this checkmate. You can't take the rook because it's defended by the bishop. If you try to take the bishop, then simply a8 equals queen, and the queen defends the rook and delivers checkmate. So here you can only delay checkmate by one move, rook to f5, and Benji has 12 seconds left. So he can make this move and promote on the next move with checkmate. So Daniel goes for rook to e7, which I guess is a good try, and Benji did not actually promote here with 12 seconds left on the clock. He played rook to b8 check. Very weird by him, instead of going for this checkmate in 1, but you know, maybe he just didn't see it. I mean, obviously he did not see it, otherwise he would have played it. We have king to c7, and now white promotes, but there's no clear checkmating here, and with only 8 seconds left, you know, either player could flag here. We have king to d6 and queen c6 check now. King to e5 and even queen e6, hanging the queen, so black can even take here, but Daniel only has 1 second left, but Benji only has 2 seconds left. So, you know, we have king to d4 and queen takes e7. Benji makes this move with only 1 second left on his clock, and so if he was only 1 second slower, Daniel would have won. But after queen takes e7, here Daniel Negreanu flagged, which means he lost. He lost on time. So yes, Benji takes game 2. He takes game 3, the tiebreaker, and wins the match. He's going to be moving on to the semifinals, and here are those standings for you. So he'll play the winner of the match between Rainn Wilson and Moist Critical, and he might even face Sardoche again in the finals if both of them win their semifinals game. So Rainn Wilson versus Moist Critical happening tomorrow. Ludwig versus Logic also happening tomorrow. And there are also 2 consolation bracket matches happening tomorrow. I don't remember who's playing off the top of my head, but there are 4 matches happening tomorrow. So I will be covering all of them. And yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say. Really crazy time scramble there at the end of this Blitz game, and really crazy game overall. Daniel was a great competitor. I hope he continues playing chess, and Benji is doing great too. I mean, I could see Benji winning this. I mean, any competitor that makes it to the semifinals could realistically win this, I think. But yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say about this game or this match. So check out my PogChamps 3 playlist up there, and check out another video over there. It's something to do with chess. That video probably has something to do with chess. So do that, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on all things chess. I love you guys. Stay awesome, and I'll see you next time.